will enjoy this one as well. But I hope you enjoy all of them, of course. But okay, but yeah, I guess you just dive right in. I remember a few years ago, I used to work at this restaurant, right? Not the same one that I worked at this past summer, but a few years ago, I worked at this restaurant while I was finishing up my years in community college, and I remember there was this one guy. I'm not trying to talk bad about this guy, but this story example kind of just fits in with the sermon. Um, but yeah, so there was just this guy. He was a new hire at the restaurant, right? And I guess the managers hired this guy because he had extensive chef knowledge, food knowledge. Yeah, like when I tell you he was cooking, he was cooking. He's all right. But yeah, yeah, he made a lot of good food, and even his background. Like I remember, I heard from one of my friends who talked to him. He was like he came from another big restaurant from a different city, and he moved to Philly, right? Um, but yeah, this guy he was really good at what he does. But every good main character of a story sometimes has one flaw, and this guy's flaw is that he was so good at everything, right? That he was good at making like the the instructions that we would give him on how to make a certain order, he would not follow it. Like um, he had a very good culinary background, but he likes to like push his way into like how he does things into like the restaurant's culture. And I remember a time he was like so so like he really wanted to push like his own methods into um, how he does things, and he wanted he just didn't listen to managers. He didn't listen to the instructions that we gave him, and he was standing on business that he was right. Like the way that he does things is right, but there's certain there are reasons behind to like why certain restaurants give like a certain portion for their meals, so the restaurant doesn't lose business either. you know um but this chef, he was kind of, yeah, he was stubborn. And I remember there was this one day when he was talking to one of the managers, and he was saying like, oh yeah, I think this sushi roll, it's so good. Like if you put like this garnish on it, and I think it would be like it would work very well. And then the manager was just like, I mean, sure, that's cool, but like that's not how we do things, because that garnish is supposed to be on this other order instead, or like that ingredient is not supposed to be used in that roll. That's why it's for that specific menu item. you know and long story short, he was kindly let go because of this sort of what's it called, just the stubbornness, and just wanting to push his way into the restaurant in this very forceful way. And the reason I'm telling you guys the story, and the reason why I'm opening up with this story, is that maybe his suggestions, my coworker's suggestion, it wasn't bad at all, but it was him feeling entitled and forcing his way into the restaurant this way, or like forcing his own methods this way. What's the issue? And I think for us as Christians, we may think that our ways are better, or maybe we even feel entitled that, like, yeah, I'm so righteous, I'm such a cool Christian, I got 50-day streak on my Bible app, or whatever it may be, that you think that we think that we're better than other people. But entitlement is very dangerous, and even oftentimes it's very easy to fall into. I hope everyone knows what entitlement means, but I'm going to explain it more in this sermon. But today, my sermon title for today is... Bro, this is like the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight, though. It's just... Okay. Wow. Thanks, Justin. My sermon title is Unentitled. Can everyone say unentitled? One, two, three. Unentitled. And yes, it's a word. I looked it up. It's in the dictionary. But I don't know why my notes always like give me the red line saying it's not a real word, but it is a real word. Okay. Wait, unentitled, to put it simply, is just the opposite of being entitled, you know? And today we are going to learn about what entitlement is and how can we avoid it, right? So today I'm actually going to go into the book of Matthew. We're going to read Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. But just a brief background about these verses. It's one of the parables that Jesus was talking about. It's the parable of the vineyard workers. Yeah, it's a good one. And, like back in the day, people were not allowed to drink water because they do not have, well, science existed back then, but technology wasn't as good back then. They didn't have filtered water. So, the big thing back in the day was like drinking wine or like, fermented drinks or alcohol or whatever it is. But, let me stop yapping and let's just go right into the verses. And you guys will see for yourself, Matthew 20, verses 1 through 7. Okay, I'm not going to make you guys read this one. You guys can just relax, follow along. Oh, it's okay, there's more verses out there. Just follow along and just try to, really, I don't know, capture the verses, I guess, just like understand it. But yeah, I'm going to read this. And Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard." So back then, the culture was many men, they went, first thing in the morning at the crack of dawn, just with their tools. They went to the marketplace and they waited there. Some landowners would usually, or some rich people would usually like hire them if they're just standing there and like they can see like right here the landowner would see like, oh, this guy has tools with him, maybe he wants to work. And a lot of times this is how people found work, was just by going early in the morning and going to the marketplace and then waiting for people to hire them. And yeah, the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius, which is like a day's wage, for the day, and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." So crack of dawn, about like 6 a.m., he already hired workers. He came back at 9 a.m. and he hired more workers. He told them, "You also go work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. And then the landowner, he went out again about at noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. And about 5 in the afternoon, which is like, it's already a whole day now, he went out and found still some more people standing around. And he asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. And the landowner said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." Now, just the illustration here that Jesus was trying to say, that the landowner is an illustration of God, right? And it's so interesting that the landowner actually went out a few times in the day instead of just like, that one time in the morning at 6 a.m. But, this just shows that this landowner, he has a lot of land. He's very rich. He has a lot of land, and he has a lot of work that people can do if they are willing to go with him. Now let's actually keep reading a few verses more, verses 8 to 10. All right, yeah. And I'm just going to read this for us. It says, "When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, 'Call the workers and pay them their wages.'" Right, so this is already the end of the day. The landowner wanted to pay the workers. Beginning with the last ones, the people that were hired last, and going on to the first hires. Verse 9, it says, the workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius, a day's wage. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. And, I guess logically we think like, why is that the people that only work like, say the work day is only until like 6 p.m., like why did the workers that only work for like an hour from 5 to 6 get the same amount as the people that worked at the beginning of the day? And the workers who were hired last, they felt this this feeling as well, and they expected to receive more. Like at this point they saw the people who were hired last getting like a denarius, like say $500, and then the people who were hired at the beginning of the day, they're already thinking like, oh man, if they get $500, then like, how much are we gonna get? We've been working here in the heat all day. We've been, slaving on this land and just like working this land. Like, how much more are we gonna get than those guys that got $500? But to their surprise, each one of them also got a denarius. They got the same wage as the people that were hired at the beginning of the day. Well, my first point for today is that entitlement comes from what we think we deserve, right? And I know for a lot of you guys that maybe it's self-explanatory, like that's, yeah, Gil, that's the definition of entitlement. But that's usually where it stems from. And for us as Christians, we're just for us out in our daily lives. And just a quick story. During COVID, right? We didn't have in-person services, so we usually, like for AGC, I remember we did a lot of Saturday recordings. If you were here for those Saturday recordings, it was a lot of fun. There was one time even when we got a blackout and we already had recorded for 2 hours and lost all content, and we stayed for another 2 hours to record everything again. So that was a lot of fun. Winston's laughing in the back because he was there. But yeah, this is the things we do. This is what we do as ministers, and this is what we do so you guys can see God as well when you're at home during COVID. But there was this one time, we served during COVID, and then there was this one time when we were allowed to go out to restaurants and meet each other. I remember I was with the praise and worship team upstairs, and there was this sort of like appreciation event, right? Like a minister's appreciation event. We went to a restaurant, and it was fun. And I remember I went to the bathroom because it was like an all-you-can-eat place, so yeah, you know what happens. Like, you go to the bathroom, you take your time, you go back, you load up some more. And I remember Kevin was like, bro, we've been waiting for you for so long. Where have you been? Bro, you know where I've been. And then he was like, okay, yeah, just sit down. And then I remember Jalid, she was like, yeah, we just wanted to thank you guys for still serving in the middle of COVID, blah, blah, blah. And we actually have a gift for someone that's actually been very, been going to ministry a lot, even though it's COVID, even though outside it's like the end of the world. People are scared of COVID, but we're still, doing online service and whatever. And, they gave it to me. It's like a appreciation gifting for being there during the time of COVID. And being there every week, and I was very appreciative of that, right? And the reason why I'm telling you guys this story is not because I'm like I want to show off, I got a gift and all that, but of course it's nice to get an appreciation gift once in a while. It's nice to get a thank you once in a while for things that you've done. But the thing with ministry, when I get to serve, it's not a time where I can just show face and show off and expect big things from other people, Just because I serve every week, just because I go to AGL, I go to church every week, or whatever it may be, or I go to all the AGC events, I help out, whatever it may be. You know, the reason why we do these things, it's not so we get, a special sort of grace or a special sort of gift, you know. And I want you guys to listen to this, but entitlement oftentimes is not focused on making sure other people get less, but it's more so focused on about us getting more. The workers who were hired at the beginning of the day, they didn't care that the people that work for an hour in the day getting like a day's wage, but they were expecting more because they did more throughout the day. Yeah, maybe for some of us, we go to church every Sunday, serve in every ministry. We help out however we can, show up to every AGL, every event, and expect for a special grace to be given to us, but that's not the case. We don't deserve grace because it was given to us by God because he wanted to give us grace. Grace is a gift, not something that we deserve. If it is something that we deserve, that means God owed us something, And that's my first point for today. Entitlement comes from what we think we deserve. And second, can we open up to Matthew 20, verses 11 to 14? And now you guys can read with me because I want to get a drink break. But verses 11 to 14, 1, 2, 3. Take away. Oh. Amen. So it's kind of funny. I was watching you, Rachel, say these verses, but it kind of I feel like that's the same kind of tone a little bit on how the workers probably said it. Yeah, these who were hired last work. Sorry, I'm not trying to make fun of you. This is not how you sound. This is how I'm pretending. No. But yeah, these who were hired last work only 1 hour. Boss, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have worked in the middle of the day where it was so hot and we woke up earlier than them and we had a lot more burdens. But it's interesting that the landowner's answer was that I'm not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? And you can actually look back to verses 1 and 2. It says, a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard, and he agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. From reading this and just from digging deeper, I realized that, this denarius that everyone was able to get, no matter when they work, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, this is an illustration of God's grace. Everyone gets the same grace. God offers everyone the same grace, I also the landowner said, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for denarius? Even though these workers were still complaining, he still referred to them as friend. But for these workers, it wasn't, they didn't think of the landowner as friend again because, they thought, oh, we got fleeced. We got, you offered me this, we were working this whole day and they thought that they got debated or something. They didn't read the fine print or whatever. But, my second point for today, entitlement destroys relationships. Again, to relate this back to the culture for today, the workers that got hired immediately, you can imagine probably, right? These workers who worked from the beginning of the day, they got up super early in the morning. So say they got they needed to be at the marketplace by 6 for them to get hired. Maybe they woke up even earlier, like 5 o'clock, getting ready, whatever it is, bring their tools, and then walking over to the marketplace from their homes. And I bet they were very ecstatic. Yo, we got hired first. We got here early, and now we're reaping our fruits. We got hired first, and we get to work for the whole day. And like to be able to get hired first thing in the morning and getting a lot of money, like in today's economy, like no, bro, like it might not be that easy, you know. But learning that the later workers getting paid the same amount that that they were getting paid made them really angry. It made them angry at the landowner, and maybe and maybe this even hindered their relationship. Another story, actually, this past week, I went to a community group at Temple. It's called Crosswalk. They're very cool people. It's like a Christian community group, not just like any community group. But I don't know. I thought I needed to clarify that. But yeah, we actually, well, they've been reading this book called The Prodigal God. It's a really good book by Tim Keller, and I only this past week when I attended, we were reading the last, not the last verse, the last chapter of the book, because they've been reading this book throughout the whole semester, right? But in this final chapter, there was a point that was that, yeah, there was a point in this one chapter that talks about how salvation is communal, And there was this one quote I really liked in the book that says, it takes a whole community to get to know one individual. It takes all of us to get to know one God, right? And maybe even then we will never know the whole extent of God, but being in a community that really pursues God is very important. And but entitlement, entitlement destroys. Entitlement is like a poison. Oftentimes, I had this other illustration I wanted to talk about. Like, if you guys know carbon monoxide, we have these things called carbon monoxide detectors, right? That's usually placed in houses so that, like carbon monoxide is something that you can't smell, that you can't notice, but oftentimes but that's why we need detectors. So so we can notice if there's carbon monoxide in the house, and to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning as well. At the same time, when we go into communities, and we are planted in a Christian community, it's so important that we get rid of our entitlement. We need to deny our self-righteousness, And maybe if we don't even notice that, another reason why it's so important to be plugged in is that so we can have friends that notify us, bro, you're being a little bit too entitled right now. You are being a little bit too much right now, in a very nice and loving, caring way. Not because, they don't like you or they wish that, you do better, but also kind of because they want you to be a better person as well, because they do love you. If we don't deny our self-righteousness, it will get in the way. It will even get in the way of our relationship with God and other Jesus followers. That's why we need to be in a community that is actively pursuing God together and deny our self-righteousness and deny our entitlement. But I guess, like, how can we, get rid of this feeling of entitlement? Can we actually open up to to Matthew 20, verses 13 to 16? And you guys can read this again as I drink some more water. 1, 2, 3. Amen. Right. I guess to, well, for my final point from these 5 verses, I want to say that the cure to entitlement is gratitude, right? Gratitude is a cure for entitlement. And it's very fitting that, we're in the month of November, we're near Thanksgiving, and it's really not poetic, but like, it's like, it's thematically, it was thematically good, I guess. But I really like, yeah, I'll just read it again. But he, the landowner, answered one of them, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Then you agree to work for a denarius. Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? A lot of times you know, the cause of entitlement is also envy, of jealousy. You know, at the beginning, these workers, I bet they were very grateful that they got to work for the day. Because I can't imagine maybe, if people are getting up very early in the day to get work, it's probably hard to get work back in the day. And these hired workers, maybe they didn't work like they didn't sign a contract to get like a year work and then get an extension or whatever, or maybe they're gonna be traded to a different team or whatever. Maybe I don't know. Try to fit in a football joke in there, but like these these guys probably like work day to day with different bosses. But I really like what it says here on verse 15. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Doesn't God has the right to do what he wants with the grace that he gives out. Or are you envious because I am generous? You know, another story for me, I guess. Like a couple of years ago, like I said earlier, I was working a lot and I was finishing up community college, right? And then after I finished up community college and got my associate's degree, I actually didn't go straight back to uni. I took a gap semester, and I just worked my butt off and just saved up a lot of money. And I guess like in that time, I felt a little bit, you know, I guess unmotivated to go to work just because like I feel there was a little bit of maybe regret and disappointment on just like dang I'm still working here. It felt like I was just doing a 9 to 5 and felt like I was just going in circles, like not really going anywhere. But I remembered that I shared this in I think my last message or a few messages ago, that my dad and my parents are, well, yeah, my dad and my mom, they're like my biggest supporters pretty much. And I remember my dad, he just told me like to not compare your own path with others paths, because you're already a kid from Indonesia coming to a new country of America. Like, of course, your life is going to be different than everyone else that lives here. Um, and for me, it was like, you like, you're right, but I still wish I am in uni and I'm just finishing up my degree. Um, but and then my dad also said, well, why don't you look at it this way? Maybe other people who's already in college, they have to juggle a job and also going to school right now. But right now you're given the chance to just work and just focus on work, and you can save up money. You can build up your own bank account, your own savings, and all that for a semester, and then you can go right back to school. And then like this point of view that my dad gave me, it was like made me realize that, oh wow, I guess like without knowing, I felt a little bit entitled. I was given a different opportunity than everyone, but I took it for granted a little bit. And I just want to read verse 15 one more time. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money, or are you envious because I am generous. A lot of times, like I said, entitlement comes from a place of jealousy. And why are we jealous of other people when, when God is acting in their lives as well? You know, like maybe we feel like, oh, like, look at all these great things that I'm doing in church. Look at all these great things that I'm doing with community in these events. Like, oh yeah, I helped carry all those chairs and I mopped the floors last night, which, I'm very grateful for everyone that did that. But there's, honestly, those sort of things shouldn't require us to expect a special kind of grace to come down from the heaven. That we shouldn't do these things because we're expecting special things to come from God, but it's the fact that God already gave us his grace, and even in the Bible says that that should be enough. Yes, the story talks about, laborers working and like different points of the day. For some of us, logically, we might think it's not fair, but God's way of rewarding is not the same as, our own human understanding of it. There was this other set of verses that if I put it in here, I don't think we'll have time to talk about it. But I remember when I was writing up this sermon, there was not an illustration, but there was an example from the Bible. It was the story of, when Jesus told Peter on like how he would die, like he would be hung on a cross, but it's because you were, because you were doing your ministry, because you wanted to die in my name. And Jesus was talking about this to Peter, and then, his brother John was also right there. But then Peter was like, okay, well, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm still going to follow you wherever you go. But how about my brother John? Is he going to get the same thing as me? And then the funny thing is, I'll look up the verses, and then if you guys want to know where it is in the Bible, I can share it with you guys. But then Jesus said to Peter, well, what's for John it's not up to, like, that's for John. That's not between me and you, Peter, and that's not between you and John, but that's up to what Jesus wants to do with John. We got to stop comparing ourselves to what's happening in other people's lives, because that's their own business with God. And, it's the thing that we got to chase is like, what business does God want to do with us? Can I actually ask the worship team to come up? And, just this thing of entitlement, it stems from what we think. I guess just to recap, entitlement comes from what we think we deserve, right? Maybe we feel like we've done so many great things in the presence of God, but the things that we do shouldn't be because we're expecting a better grace from God, a better reward from God. But the things we do, the reason on why we do things for God is because God already did something for us. God already sacrificed his one and only son for us and gave us his grace. And number two, entitlement destroys relationship. If we stay entitled, it destroys our relationship, not just with other Jesus followers, but it also destroys our own relationship with God. And, to cure all this, have a sense of gratitude. Maybe these early workers, they were very grateful of what, maybe they were more grateful of, the landowner hiring them first in the day. Maybe they'd be like, oh man, I got hired first in the day. That's so great. I get to work. I get to get paid for the day. I get to feed my family. I get to, feed myself. I get to pay my rent, whatever it is. And, you just get a whole different outlook in your life. And probably same thing for those people that got hired last. I bet they were very grateful that, in the beginning, they were probably like, man, there's no one coming to hire us, but before the day ends, they get hired at the last minute. The landowner comes in like, hey, you want to work at my field? I'll pay you what you deserve, or I'll pay you what I feel you deserve. And the landowner feels that those people that worked at the end of the day, they deserve the same amount as those worked at the beginning of the day. I guess to relate this to even our own Christian lives, maybe some of us have been in church for most of our lives. Ever since we were born. We were born into church. We were born into our families that go to church a lot. And, we've been a Christian our whole lives. And maybe for some of us, we only started becoming Christian maybe like last month or yesterday, or maybe like, I don't know, a year ago or whatever it may be. But for every one of us, the good news is that, this grace is still the same for every one of us. Just because I was born into a Christian family doesn't mean I will get a lot more grace than someone else that just started going to church. And at the same time, that person that just started going to church, they're not going to get a partial portion of grace. They're not going to get half of what grace is, but they get to experience the whole thing. And to close out, I want to open up to my last verse for today, 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9. All right, and I just want to read this for you guys real quick. Let's read it together. 1, 2, 3. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty he might become rich. If anyone is allowed to be entitled, I would say it's God. He's the only one that's allowed to be entitled, because he was perfect. He was perfect. He is perfect. And he will be, and he still is perfect. But instead, God, in his gracious self, he willingly came down to earth, not as as someone that was very grand, but he came to earth in the form of a human, not even born in a hospital or in a house or whatever it may be, but he was born in a manger next to some sheep. In reality, we are owed nothing, but God willingly gave us everything. We don't even deserve grace, where in reality, what we are deserving for is actually hell. But God invited us, and God invites us right now, and he sacrificed his one and only son for our sins, and has given us a gift, this gift of grace. And it is, up to us. Are we willing to deny our own self-righteousness to pursue God, to really understand God, and just be like God, I don't know what you're doing in this season for me right now, but maybe that's not up to me to know why you're doing these things, but I still know that you are good, and I know that you are very gracious.